wonderful people out there, you fantastic, amazing human beings who continue to tune in and listen to my wonderful co-host Susan Eisenberg and I chat all about Justice League, revisiting the show, as Susan likes to say. That's what you like to say, that right? Revisiting?
I do. Any chance I can get with our posts or in just conversation, I like using our title. Because it's so perfect, right? We're revisiting all these episodes. Today may be a little bit different because we're not revisiting a particular episode, but we're revisiting the experience of the show. Do you want to tell people who we have on?
Of course, we have the titles that this man has. When I was looking up all the stuff he's done, he's basically the art director and producer, but that entails animator, character design, prop design, art director of all these different things. Glen Murakami, whose name has come up so often from Dan Rich, and I think Stan mentioned him, and I think Phil Marr mentioned him at one point, the drawings that he, the art and the art department. So this is going to be very exciting.
It is. And, it was so interesting because when I was talking to Glenn about being on the show, he said, I don't know, because I don't know if people are going to really be that interested. And I'm like, have you met our fans? Have you met the fans of the show? Because the fans, love hearing about the background, about the character development, all of this. It's intriguing, and it's a huge part of the puzzle that is the Justice League. And I'm really looking forward to this. I have a bunch of questions on a piece of paper right here in front of me, and I can't wait to get to it.
I am excited as well. I, too, have a lot of questions about the art and the style. And he's worked on so much in the DC animated realm. We might dovetail into some of those as well, because there's so many different ways to take this conversation other than just Justice League. So we'll see what all he has to say about all of that. I think he's going to have a lot to say. So without further ado, joining us now, Emmy Award-winning producer, an Eisner Award-winning writer, director, art production, character design. The man's done it all. We're going to try to talk about as much of it as possible in the course of our time. We've got Glen Murakami joining us. Thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Okay, so far the most understated guest we've had. Glenn, are you shy?
But I think a lot of times it's kind of like you get questions like, what was it like making history? And it's just like...
Oh, shoot. That's our third question, right, James?
Let me scratch it off here right now. Let me get rid of it.
Take that one off the list.
Kind of the last big kind of interview, circuit I did was for the Batman Beyond anniversary. Mm-hmm. And I swear almost every question was like, what was it like making history? And it's kind of like, I think every single person asked me that question.
Well, and we're not going to ask you, James.
Not anymore.
We're not going to ask you, Glenn. I mean, we were going to, but now we're not.
but I think maybe I've noticed when people talk about the animated series, I noticed the timeline really flattens out. And I think they think everything is really consecutive and back to back. And to me, oh, wait, it was a lot longer than that. And I guess I feel like I need to get kind of a running start on it because I need to kind of maybe explain the context of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. In fact, we always ask guests, they're obviously connected to the Justice League, and that's primarily why they're there on the show. But we also want to hear how you got there and what came before it. And
I mean, my first job was, Batman the Animated Series. And luckily, it was when animation was kind of going through a boom. Mm-hmm. And I think all of a sudden they were ramping up and they were going into a lot of productions and they just needed a lot of people. And I think kind of the thing with Batman was they wanted to do something, and a lot of the older, more seasoned animation people, a lot of them were like, you can't do that. And I think the reason why a lot of kind of greener people got hired was we didn't have a lot of those habits.
Mm-hmm.
So really a lot of the things were like, well, we want to use black in a cartoon. And I think that scared a lot of people. And I didn't really come from an animation background, but I think I understood what Bruce wanted. So I think that was a lot easier for me to do that.
Can we start with, can I ask you, you said you didn't really want to do that. So what was it that you wanted to do? And how did you even get to a Bruce Timm and Warner Brothers and Batman the Animated Series?
I wanted to be more of a comic book artist just because I think I wasn't interested in animation because they weren't making things like Batman. And then suddenly you see that they're making something like Batman, and then you go, well, okay, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I didn't go to art school. I was kind of bumming around a little bit lost. A friend of mine happened to submit his portfolio to Warner Brothers. And because he didn't go back to get his portfolio right away, it sat in a stack. And because it sat in a stack, Eric Radomski happened to look at his portfolio and go, wow, this guy's great. We're going to hire him for Batman. Then my friend worked on Batman for like a few months. And then I made an appointment with Warner Brothers for another show. And I had an interview. And when I was going up for the interview, they canceled on me. So my friend took my portfolio to Bruce and Eric. And Bruce and Eric looked at it and they went, well, you can draw, so we'll give you a test. And I missed Comic-Con that year because I was working on my test for Batman. And I turned it in, and Bruce was like, well, it sucks, but you can draw. We'll take a chance on you and hire you anyway.
Okay. Wow.
So I just kind of lucked out. I had a portfolio, but I had a bunch of sketchbooks. And in the sketchbooks, that's the stuff all those guys focused on. And in those sketchbooks, I had like Alex Toth type stuff or Universal Monsters type stuff. So I had enough stuff in it that those guys connected with it that they went, okay, we'll take a chance on you because you seem to be focusing on the same stuff that we're focusing on.
So you show up to the Batman the Animated Series, and how scared are you in those early days when you're showing up in these rooms with these people and you're like, okay, I'm here to work. What happens then?
I didn't know anything, so I kind of had to learn really quickly. I think I was real excited because I think I felt like I found my people. Just because all of this stuff I was kind of curious about, that's what they were all into. Mm-hmm. So I think I was just really enthusiastic and excited about kind of finding my tribe. Comics were really starting to change, Image Comics and all of that stuff. And I guess I was more into older stuff or classical stuff. I think I bought a real crappy copy of like The Third Man in high school on VHS and watched that. So, you know, I would hear like, well, if you want to understand storytelling, you got to watch Citizen Kane. So I think I got a bootleg of Citizen Kane. So already I was kind of gearing up for Batman without even knowing it.
Sure. How old were you at this point, Glenn, when you started that?
High school.
Wow.
I mean, I started to get more into comics in junior high school. Mm-hmm. And kind of as that was happening, the independent comic boom was starting to happen. So comics were starting to change. And then maybe around high school, I was lucky. I worked in this genre bookstore that sold comic books, but only new comics, not back issues. And the guy who ran the bookstore was kind of part of comic fandom, but also kind of in the 70s, he had been importing European comics and Japanese comics to the United States. And his bookstore mostly carried like genre fiction. So science fiction, mystery, horror. So, the shelves had like Jim Thompson books, Robert E. Howard, Philip K. Dick. And then because that was the store, kind of some well-known people in the business would occasionally stop by and shop there. I remember when James Ellroy put out the Black Dahlia, he did a book signing at the store. So I maybe wasn't well read, but I kind of knew all the names because I sold this stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And then he would talk about all the older stuff. So he would talk about magazine illustrators, and he would talk about old radio, and he would talk about old movies. So maybe I didn't know it, but I would constantly hear the names all the time.
Education. That's an education in and of itself. I mean, you don't pay for that education, but you get an education that way.
And I think then once I got to Warner Brothers, then I everyone was well read in a different area there too. So then I think that was my education, is just kind of learning on the job. But I think everyone was really interested in all of that stuff, not just comic books, but, watching Hitchcock movies, watching The Third Man, watching Citizen Kane,
Great storytelling, no matter what the form, right? I mean, it was just all about telling stories and making them interesting.
Well, what's funny is when I think back on it, a lot of films still weren't available. Like if you wanted to see a film, you had to go to a revival house, or it was all starting to come out on VHS. It was all starting to come out on, DVD, but there was still, even in the 90s, there was still that curve. Like I remember discovering all those Anthony Mann film noir movies, like, so all of that stuff was starting to become accessible, but I don't think it's like it is today. I mean,
now, today's an embarrassment of riches because between the streaming services, and if you don't want to do that, if you go on eBay or any place else, you can find a DVD copy or a VHS copy. So, like I said, it's almost impossible now. When I think back, like you said, even like 20, 30 years ago, it's hard to imagine that you'd had to try to track down a VHS copy of The Third Man, where now it's like, it's streaming on Hulu and Roku and Amazon. It's a different world completely.
I think you would find a book and you would read an article on like a movie, and then you'd hunt for that movie. But sometimes the only reason why you knew about that movie was because it's like you read someone's sort of review on it, or, hey, this revival house is going to show it. Then you all kind of run down there to go see it. Now when I look back on it, it's like, yeah, we really did kind of slowly have to piece everything together.
And from a storytelling standpoint, some of those Batman original episodes were just fantastic. Like when you think of, Heart of Ice and stuff like that, where that revolutionized Mr. Freeze's origin story. We had more sympathetic villains. They weren't just these big cackling costume people. And that's, again, a testament to the storytelling as well.
I think, the thing about Batman was it was taking at the time, maybe 40 years worth of Batman and just cherry picking the best stuff and then just trying to distill it down into like the best version of Batman. I think that's what was great about the show. I think also what was great about the show is the emphasis on making the villains sympathetic and making the villains human.
Yeah.
And it's not just adapting the comic book. It's figuring out how to distill it all down into something to try to make it work the best. And I think maybe people focus too much on maybe the comic book continuity of it all. And I just don't think we're trying to be attached to it in that way. I think we're just trying to how do you just execute the best story? And then we don't have room for that. We don't have time for that. You throw it out. I mean, you're not throwing it out to be disrespectful. It's just, you know, here's the best way that we feel we can execute that stuff. And I don't know. It's sort of that simple to me. You know, we're trying to have a worldview. We're trying to have a perspective. And then I think another thing is we worked on how many episodes. So just to give people kind of some understanding, when you start a show, maybe by the 13th episode, that's when you start getting footage back. So you can do a whole season's worth of a show and not know what you're going to get back. And then you start getting the episodes back. Then you watch the episodes and you go, well, that didn't work.
Then what? Oops. Then what happens?
Well, I think that's the thing about why did we change the design? Why did you guys do this? Why did you? I think it was like, well, that didn't work. How can we make it better? Well, that didn't work. How can we refine that?
And was typically there a consensus of what worked and what didn't work? Were you typically on the same page with all of that?
Well, I think the other thing people don't understand too is it's like you're doing the blueprints for a house. Then you throw the blueprints in a box, you mail it overseas, and then they mail the house back. I don't think people understand, like, we're telling them to kind of follow these instructions, but you 100% don't know what you're going to get back. And remember, too, this is pre-digital. You can't take everything and kind of have this really close color version. There is a little bit of guesswork to it, and also interpretation. You don't have complete control. You're using how many different studios? It's a different culture. It's a different language. On that original.
Glenn, for people who don't know, where are you sending it to?
I mean, I can't completely remember, but I mean,
the country that you're sending it to.
I mean, that's the thing. On the original Batman series, I think we tried several different studios. I mean, a lot. You know, Korea, Japan. I can't remember. I think maybe Filipino studios were used. I think somehow there was like a Spanish studio that was used or something. Somehow even like Gendy happened to work on Batman, the animated series, because somehow he was doing some kind of, I can't remember what the connection was, but somehow he interned or something at some overseas animation studio. So somehow even he worked on it for like I could be wrong. I thought it was like maybe some Spanish studio that helped do layouts.
Interesting.
And then that somehow he ended up working on the show. But Batman the Animated Series was, you know, really special, but also like a learning curve for like a lot of people. And yeah, it changed the industry kind of. I think what people don't realize, though, is in between Batman the Animated Series and Superman, there is a gap of maybe 2 years to a year and a half. So that gap of a year, you know, 2 years and a half is you start over again. But I think the difference when it came to Superman was suddenly there were people who now knew who Bruce Timm was and now understood what the style was. So now when these people walked in off the street, their portfolios look completely different than the original crews, because now people are like coming saying, well, we want to draw this way.
Right.
So then that was sort of a big shift from Batman to Superman. But even on Superman, just him flying, just all the daylight, it wasn't easy. So the reason why I feel this is real important is Bruce knew how hard Batman was to make. And then working on Superman, Bruce was like, yeah, Superman was not easy. And then I think what people don't realize is partway through Superman, we did the world's finest crossover.
Yeah.
And then something happened where they suddenly went, hey, you know what? We want more Batmans. So we kind of halted Superman, quickly retooled a lot of that Batman stuff. And the reason why we changed some stuff is Bruce realized there was a lot of stuff that he didn't like that wasn't working about the animated stuff. And there was a lot of stuff that we had to match to Superman. So we redesigned the Batman stuff.
Yeah, and the Batman one's a noticeable redesign of the way the characters looked and everything like that from the original animated series from 92 to 95 into the new Batman Adventures. It's a, you know, the people were very struck by how different the character looked. And I go both ways. I'm not sure which one I like better depending on what mood I'm in, because he's lost now the circle, the symbol around the bat. It's just the black bat. It's gray and black, no more blues. I'm assuming that was, like you said, stuff you learned.
But here's the thing, though. No one is breaking into your house and erasing those.
Right, exactly.
You still have those to watch. And I think for us, we want to do something new. We want to do something fresh. We also are adapting to what we've learned from the previous stuff, what we felt was working, what we feel wasn't working. And then also, too, it's experimentation. We are trying different things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But there's sort of a rigidity to how everyone thinks that we do everything, and it's just not that way, so when we were doing the World's Finest crossover, we did get some of the old backgrounds from the original Batman, and we had to scan them. Well, over time, that black paper that we painted the backgrounds on, that paper wasn't the best archival paper. And that black paper was sucking up the paint. So a lot of the color on those paintings was kind of muted. And the scanning technology was not great back then.
Sure.
So when we scanned those BGs looked really muddy and dark. And moving forward, it's like, well, some of the stuff we can't use. So we're going to have to kind of do it kind of aligned with how we're doing the Superman stuff. So, yeah, we changed it, but there were like problematic reasons, technical reasons why we just couldn't switch from one thing to another. I'm sorry people don't like it, but those were the reasons.
No, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, I didn't like this, like the old or the new. It's not like the Snyder fans who are they want this version of Batman or this version of Superman. I feel like people just always like, oh, this is why some people started with the new adventures and that's how they're used to it. Some people started with the original series. That's how they're used to it. I don't think I've ever, or maybe I'm just lucky and I don't have a lot of toxic people around me, but I've never heard anyone say they didn't like one version of the other, which I think is, again, a testament to how much people did like the overall style.
The reason why I want to talk about some of this stuff is just to explain context and just to explain. Sure. I mean, Superman was a big show and it was a difficult show. And Superman is just Superman fighting, the villain of the week. That was really hard. And then I think the reason why Bruce is like, do we want to throw more characters into the mix? I think that's why doing Justice League, you can't just go from Batman the Animated Series to Justice League. We needed to build up to it. So we do World's Finest, then we do more Batmans. Then I can't remember, somewhere in there we are doing Batman Beyond, but then we have to go back and finish the rest of the Supermans. So I don't think what people understand is at one point we were doing Superman, Batman Beyond, and the whatever they call the revamped Batman.
Wow.
At one point we were doing all three at one time. I can kind of honestly say at the end of that, we were kind of tired.
Sure.
So I think that's why I want to explain too, is I don't think people realize like we were doing all three at one time, kind of. And then there was a little bit of a lull. I can't remember how much time, but during that time, we had pitched an anime Batman show. And that anime Batman show, if it had gone, I would have probably been like heading that show with Bruce kind of I mean, I could be misremembering it, but this is kind of what I remember. I would have been heading up that Batman show, and James Tucker would have kind of been the lead on Justice League. And part of kind of what we learned working with this Japanese animation studio kind of during Superman and Batman Beyond was we learned a lot because we got really close to this Japanese studio, and we were kind of, it wasn't just an outsourced studio. We were getting closer to the studio where we were building a lot of trust with them. And I think if we had done that anime show, I think once again, we would have thought that would have been an advancement, and it would have been something different than what we had done previously with Batman and Superman and Batman Beyond. So I was kind of excited about that. And some of that thinking went towards Teen Titans.
Right.
So I think that's why I wanted to back up and kind of explain kind of the evolution of that. Also, some of the things behind the scenes that was kind of happening is they had just built that big animation building based on how business was in the 90s at Warner Brothers. And the business kind of changed. And then Gene McCurdy, who was running Warner Brothers, management changed. So that's also kind of what was going into Justice League. And then I think, once again, I could be wrong, but I think during that time, Hasbro Kenner stopped with the DC license and it switched to Mattel.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's another reason why I kind of wanted to back up a little bit too. It's not just the shows that are different. It's kind of also the world around us is changing.
Absolutely.
I can't remember if we pitched Justice League to maybe Kids WB or not. I don't think they were interested, so that's why we pitched Justice League the Cartoon Network.
But you had been talking about, when we were talking, you and I on the phone last week, you had said that, doing one character was hard enough. Never mind creating 7 looks, 7 lives for 7 characters. So whose idea was it to then go in that direction and pitch the show of Justice League?
I think people had been bugging Bruce all along about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I can't remember the name of there's a Batman Beyond episode where we did the future Justice League.
The Call.
Yeah. I think after the Call, I think Bruce felt maybe a little bit more confident about maybe we can do the Justice League. But, even doing Batman, Nightwing, Robin, and Batgirl, that's kind of a team. But, even that is a little bit more grounded. You know what I mean? It's going to a warehouse. It's riding on a motorcycle. The bigger the sets, the more kind of characters. I tell people it's spinning plates. It's really difficult. You have to keep track of where Hawkgirl is. You have to keep track of where Batman is. Logistically,
sure.
staging wise, that's complicated. It's difficult.
So when you're going around and when you're talking about pitching to Cartoon Network, who is in? Are you in that meeting with Bruce?
I wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was Bruce talking to Mike Lazo at Cartoon Network.
Mm-hmm.
I remember early talks with Bruce about Justice League. I mean, this is what I remember. I remember Bruce and I saying, there's got to be a big enough problem that Batman and Superman feel that they can't handle together and that they need these other characters. You know, if you read the comic book, Superman behaves one way, Batman behaves another way, but kind of when you read them in Justice League, they're slightly different characters. It's not because you're trying to be out of continuity. The dynamics of the characters work differently. Batman is a very grounded character who's fighting on Earth, and he's fighting like kind of street criminals. Mm-hmm. Even as fantastical as Joker is and everything, it's still a much different kind of world universe than Justice League. So the dynamics of the characters have to be different. So, you know, I remember us talking about that kind of stuff early on, where Batman and Superman need to bring in a team. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember, you know, Jon Stewart's just cooler than Hal Jordan. I mean,
that was one of the things, Glenn, when we were talking, that there was there was this discussion in the fandom about Jon versus Hal, and what were those conversations like when there was a commitment to using Jon?
Me personally speaking, mm-hmm. kind of, I didn't really like Super Friends. I didn't really like. There was a generic quality to some of the DC characters where it just felt like same body, different head. Mm-hmm. They all kind of just seemed very similar to me. And I think going into Justice League's, how do you vary the characters more? How do you give them more individual, distinct personalities? And by doing that, it makes different natures of the characters come through and just makes everything kind of more dimensional. So, you know, that's sort of what's important to us, is just, if we're going to expend all this energy making the show, what is it about this that's going to make it interesting, make it dynamic, make it, I hesitate to say real, because I don't think necessarily that's the emphasis. I don't think the emphasis is realism. I think you want it grounded because you want believability, you want drama. The stakes need to be that if a character can get hurt, then you care about them. I mean, look, this isn't a criticism, but it's TV animation. It's done really quickly. Part of what's difficult about animation is weight, is giving the characters, grounding them. Things like walk cycles are very, very difficult to do, because if they're done badly, the characters look floaty and weightless. And the same is true of flying. Just because you make the character fly, it needs the weight pulling against it to make it look believable. Mm-hmm. If not, it just kind of looks like a balloon. So
it's so interesting, Glenn, because as you're talking about defining these characters, when we think about how characters are defined, so much is in the writing, right? Like what is put to the page. And then there's this, which I didn't think about this before, but then how were they drawn? How do they move through these universes? And you put those two things together, and then you put a voice into it and some other things, some music in the background. I mean, it's all of these aspects that create this character. And I think it's so valuable to hear we've heard from a lot of the writers, right, James? I mean, we've had a lot of the writers on the show so far, but you're the first person that we've talked to, with the exception of Dan, who can speak to creating this groundedness, this how they're flying, how they're walking. I love I mean, it's such an important conversation to have, because it's it's such an important piece to this puzzle.
You play it straight.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, It's not, you don't have to play it cartoony. You just have to play it real. You don't have to play it big. You just play it real. Like, I think we were just trying to make kind of what we didn't think we were seeing in the comic, or we were just trying to make what we thought we saw other people's interpretations of superheroes not doing. that's not a criticism. That's just, but this is our taste. This is what we like. This is what we're trying to sell.
Well, and also you made a show that you would want to watch. You made a show that was interesting for all of you to work on and go to work every day and create characters and places that you were interested in that you hadn't seen before. And I think that sincerity, that authenticity is why we're still talking about the show and all these shows, by the way, 20 years later.
I mean, I hope so. I tried watching a few of them and all I can see is kind of like I didn't hit it, kind of like, backtrack another, once again, this is not really an excuse, but it's sort of to explain. We were transitioning into digital kind of around Batman Beyond. And kind of what happened on Batman Beyond was they took the cell paint colors and they adapted it to digital, but they kind of didn't take into consideration that when you're seeing those colors, you're seeing those colors through cell density. And that cell density kind of grazed the color down a little bit. So they took the paint chips and made it digital, but then they also kind of came out too bright. And then all the ink and paint chips that we kind of had all corresponded to like a tube of paint. So kind of what was happening is like Warner Brothers was a little bit tentative. They were like, okay, we're going to try this digital thing, but if we try it and it doesn't work, we're going to have to go back to the traditional way. So they didn't want to throw everything out. They still kind of wanted to stick within the system that they already had. So we didn't get a full box of crayons. We just got the ink and paint palette. So kind of when I look at Justice League, I cringe a little bit because I feel like I would have done this, and this, but I didn't have it.
Interesting.
I think that's always everyone's their own worst critic. There's probably a little bit of that because, like I said, the show still holds up really well. It's like the gold standard of superhero shows for a lot of people. So is a little bit of that just you being a little hard on yourself, maybe?
No, I think some of it is just technical issues.
Right.
Like here's the thing. I don't think we're going like if you look at a computer monitor, the range of colors you see on a computer monitor, we still weren't allowed to use all those colors because we still had to be broadcast. So you take that footage and you put it through an oscilloscope and all the colors kind of have to be within a range. So even if we used all the colors would have been crushed down because it still needs to be broadcast. And at the time, the broadcast space was smaller. So that's the reason why technically the parameters of colors needed to be a smaller range of color. So, like that's the thing. You're looking at a computer monitor, you can see all those colors and you go, well, wait a second, I don't understand. This is what I'm seeing. Why am I not getting this? Well, technology.
Right. So when you look back on those characters, when you remember creating the looks of some of these characters, is there anything with any of those characters, with any of the 7 that you remember and distinctly, like that conversation we had about Wonder Woman being from Greek origin or something else, something about the way the character looks? Or is there anything about any one of those characters?
Well, I'll tell you what I was concerned with. I knew that the Justice League, all the characters were very colorful and kind of primary colors. So my concern is that if you've got all that color on the screen, that's where I want your eye to go. So if you're looking at Flash, I kind of want Flash to be the only red thing. So I'm going to mute all the other reds down or tell background painters don't use red. Because when Flash comes through, I want your eye to focus on Flash. But knowing that everyone is so color, I think that's what makes everything cartoony. Is just everything is super colorful, everything is super primary. I don't have a problem with that, but I want that to be the focal point. So I'm willing to kind of mute down all the colors around those characters to make those characters kind of pop.
So speaking of the show, so Justice League, when I approached you about being a guest on our show, you said, well, Suze, I wasn't there for a long time. I moved on and I did other things. And I said, right. So can you talk about moving on and what you did next and how that all came to be?
I mean, to back up a little bit, I sort of feel like there was a lot of weird logistical things to figure out, just generating the art for the show. And I felt like someone needed to kind of worry about that stuff. So I feel like I took it on myself to focus more on how to handle some of that other stuff.
When you and I talked on the phone, Glenn, you talked a lot about creating these worlds where these characters live and how much energy and thought and care goes into creating these spaces where these characters, live. And I thought that was so fascinating. And I said, save it for the show. Bring it onto the show, because we were talking about John and John's neighborhood that John was in, and what went into that and how important it was and how much attention was paid to that. What struck me is how much energy goes into these choices that the fans watching at home have no idea about, of course, because we're not in those rooms and you are. So if you don't mind, I know I asked you about Teen Titans, but like you said, let's back up a little bit and maybe just address some of those spaces that you created for Justice League.
Well, I think going into the show, I think there was a notion that there were so many characters and the shows were so big, we had to make them two-parters. But I think ultimately Bruce wasn't happy with the two-parters because I think he felt like they dragged. But I think every show there's kind of that learning curve. Like, it takes you a while to figure out what's working, what's not working. I know all the intention and the reason why we did it. It's just, how are we going to fit all these characters into a story? And then I think, well, we got to make them two-parters. But then I think ultimately, once you kind of go through that, then you kind of learn, we can streamline this. We can make it tighter. It's just that learning curve. Mm-hmm. I think there's stuff about the look of the characters that, I think Bruce wasn't happy with. I think, part of the problem with Justice League is just how big it was. There's these super powered characters, but they're flying in a spaceship. Yeah. But then you kind of have to do that because you need sort of exposition and you need them to kind of talk but also too, you just don't want them too powerful, because then there's no drama in that either. So mm-hmm. that's what I mean. It's like those kinds of things are like, they're problematic. Like, you could do one comic book panel of them flying in space, but if you're doing a scene with them, several scenes of them flying in space, you kind of go, that doesn't look right. You know what I mean? Wonder Woman having a conversation with Hawkgirl flying in space from planet to planet. You need to get that exposition across, but it's like, I don't know, that just doesn't look right. you know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
But, you need to show Jon Stewart in his neighborhood where he kind of comes from, to sort of ground him as human before you take him into this fantastical space story.
Right.
But, that was very different than what we had seen on Superman and what we had seen on Batman. But I remember having conversations with James Tucker about, let's make everyone in this neighborhood black, and let's not make it some graffiti covered neighborhood kind of. Like, I wonder now if it kind of has a generic quality to it, but I know the intention wasn't to try to I don't know. Like to this day, I guess I'm still trying to figure out how to solve the problem. Like, did we execute it correctly? Kind of.
Have you and James talked about that episode? Have you had a conversation with him about that?
I think we all kind of know, like, yeah, we did this good. We did this just okay. Like, well, we solved this. We didn't always solve that. You know what I mean? I think we all are sort of critical of like just the scope of Justice League was harder. It's just every episode was kind of a mini movie. Every episode was kind of going to a new world, and it was huge. I mean, to get the scale of it required a lot of incidental characters. Like, that's the thing. You're drawing pedestrian number 3. They're only going to be on the screen for 2 scenes, but still someone had to draw that character.
Right.
And those resources eat up time and space. I think that's the thing that people don't recognize.
Or that little girl Cassie from Paradise Lost, who was climbing the tree for some reason. Someone had to draw that little girl, which we talked about for Paradise Lost. So we're like, why was she out in the tree in the storm? But that's obviously someone had to draw that. It's all those little things, though, that all those little details that I love so much when I watch this, because you can tell the kind of care that the art team put into it. And that's one of the reasons I love it. And I'm curious then, with all the stuff you did learn and looking back and say, we learned this, we knew what not to do. When you get to come on and basically be the head honcho on 65 episodes of Teen Titans, what did you bring with you as to what worked and what didn't work in your sensibilities when you came onto this brand new series?
Well, during Justice League, they started to we started doing development on Teen Titans. And even James Tucker helped kind of, he was in on some of the early rounds of development, and James kind of deserves credit for Starfire, because I had drawn a Starfire, and then I think James had drawn over my Starfire. So some of the Starfire costume James helped design, and he deserves credit for that. Kind of what some of the notions of what we wanted to do with that Batman anime show kind of went towards some of the thinking in Teen Titans. That's another reason why I wanted to kind of explain that pitch. Somewhere along the line, too, James Tucker did a Young Justice pitch. And I can't remember when that happened. If that happened back on Batman Beyond, or if it happened in that middle period between, I can't remember now. I can speak maybe a little bit about that Justice League Teen Titans crossover.
Sure.
Yes.
I remember it being mentioned. And I don't remember how far it got, because it didn't involve me. But I know first season of Teen Titans, I think I did it it was on Kids WB and Cartoon Network. I think the first season.
Oh.
And then the toy license for Teen Titans was with Bandai. So part of me is kind of like, yeah, maybe someone talked about the crossover, but I don't know how the crossover would have worked. You know what I mean? I don't know who that would have been beneficial to, because, you know, 2 different toy licenses, and then we were kind of straddling 2 different. I can't remember what the deal was. I thought we were kind of aired on both at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but that's my memory of it. I remember having to deliver an edit for both formats, for Kids WB and for Cartoon Network. So I think another thing back in the day that people don't realize is that if someone had the license to Superman, sometimes all Superman characters were kind of off limits, because they're trying to sell that franchise, and then like, oh, then we're doing Batman, that's off limits. So like, we tried to use Wonder Girl for, Teen Titans, but we were told all the Wonder stuff is off limits.
No Wonder stuff. Okay.
Well,
Duly noted. Yeah, sure.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
of
don't
course.
know if Wonder Girl gets packaged as part of Wonder Woman. So if someone makes some big Wonder Woman movie, I think they want to be able to sort of sell them that franchise.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Yeah, I know that's the way it works with live action. I didn't realize animation was that held to those strict standards as well. That's interesting.
I mean, like I said, I don't know the details of it. It's just so for example, on Teen Titans, we were going to use Blockbuster, but then we kind of redesigned Blockbuster and DC didn't like it. So we ended up having to rename the character Cinderblock.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, but at the same time, Justice League requested using Blockbuster, and they were told, you can't use Blockbuster because Teen Titans is using them. So what ends up happening is both of us didn't get to use Blockbuster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that was going on. So we got to put Nightwing in Teen Titans, but then no action figure could be made of Nightwing. So there's stuff like that going on that you can request using a character, but I don't know the details of what's going on at DC or what's going on with other things where suddenly you can't use a character, or you can use a character, but you can only use the character once.
Right.
So stuff like that is happening, and I don't think people kind of realize it.
For sure not. I mean, Dan Reba when we had Dan on, he was discussing how Wonder Woman was the last character that they got because of licensing. And so that was the last character they cast because there were some issues with DC and using the character. So, there's always backstory that most people are not privy to unless you have a podcast and you can interview Dan Reba and Glen Murakami.
I don't remember that. James and Bruce would know better than I would. I remember hearing Dan say that, and I don't remember that at all.
Okay, well, we'll hopefully have both of those gentlemen on the show at some point down the road when their schedule lightens up a bit. But I did have a question about Teen Titans because on Justice League, you had your responsibilities and you had what you did on Justice League. Then you go over to Teen Titans and you're the boss. You're the showrunner. And that had to be a huge, all this time you had been working with Bruce, who was the showrunner, and now you're the guy in charge. What was that transition like for you, dealing with all these new responsibilities and pressures and all this other stuff that you had to deal with running Teen Titans?
It's you don't know what you kind of don't know or know until kind of after the fact, kind of.
Right.
I have a greater appreciation for what Bruce had to deal with after kind of running my own show, kind of. You realize just kind of how much there is to kind of deal with. And yeah, it's kind of scary. It's a big responsibility. I had good training from working with Bruce for so many years. I got lucky, kind of working with a lot of people who already kind of knew what they were doing, the composers, Joe Gall, the editor, Andrea, I was taught by very seasoned people. There was also a certain freedom because we weren't doing what Bruce did, I could go left instead of right, so there were a lot of eyes not on us. I think people were focusing on a lot of other stuff, and I think a lot of people just thought we were going to go one season and get canceled. I think a lot of people thought we were crazy. When they get angry, their heads get real big. I just think people were like, I think people thought we were crazy.
My last question I want to ask you is, being the showrunner, you had, all the responsibilities. One of the things I'm always fascinated by is the casting, the voice casting, bringing people in for the role. Do you remember, was there one character of the main 5 on Titans that was easier to cast than another? Did Kari Payton come in and just be like, oh, that's Cyborg? Or did Tara Strong come in and say, man, that's our, that's our Raven? Did you know, or was one particularly hard?
Because we were, this is more a Justice League thing. Kind of we were sharing the same recording booth, and sometimes, how it got, like, you can't get everybody in the room at the same time. So, like, the flight deck is stacked. So, you know what I mean? You guys are recording, and then, so at one point I remember Clancy Brown I'm standing in the recording booth. Clancy Brown is standing on one side of me, and Ron Perlman is standing on the other side of me. So I'm standing, in between, like, what Hellboy and the Kurgan, kind of, like, yikes.
Wow.
Recordings were fun. I mean, that's when the show is kind of coming together. You can hear it kind of come to life. Yeah, I mean, the cast were huge.
When you're creating these characters, do you have a voice ever in your head?
I try not to do that just because you just don't want to be that rigid about it, because that's also why you're hiring the actor to do their job. Mm-hmm. If you're doing the job for them, what's the point of that? And no one is happy, right? So the audition for Teen Titans was really special. I mean, we auditioned a lot of people. Starfire was very much like Wonder Woman. She was the last one, kind of, and I don't think Hynden came in with the regular group of auditions. I think Hynden was sort of a last minute, kind of just different than the audition process. Titans was also different too, because you brought in a bunch of people who were new. They were new voices and you hadn't heard them before. So that was pretty special too. Greg and Kari were kind of new to voiceover, and you recognize, like, oh yeah, we have something special. I remember Kari jumping during his audition, and he was shaking the mic stand. Like, we had to kind of tell him, like, we're picking that up. So can you please not jump? But that's how excited he was.
And how new he was, right? Because, so sweet.
But his enthusiasm was amazing. The famous story with Tara was she came in, did her audition, and I think she says she was walking out and she saw that I was making a face, I think. So she went, let me try one more thing, and went back in and did the vocal fry thing. I think maybe she's like one of the first ones to kind of pick up on doing that vocal fry voice.
Probably.
kind of before it became a thing.
Right.
I mean, not saying she created it, but maybe one of the earliest kind of captures of that character.
Mm-hmm.
I remember some of the Justice League auditions.
Really?
Yeah. There were a lot of people. I think it was at Salami.
It was. But I had a callback. I think I was one of the few people who had a callback, and the callback was at the animation building.
I'm trying to remember now. Maybe the recording studio wasn't finished. Maybe that's why we were at Salami.
Okay. I don't think it was finished. I don't think, because we moved at some point. We moved from one location to another location, and then all of a sudden we were at a mall. We were at the mall.
I mean, we used to be in that bank building until they finished the animation studio. So that animation studio was brand new.
Yes, I remember. It was exciting. It's weird that it was in a mall, but it was exciting.
Yeah, because when we were making Batman, we were at that mall. That's like where they filmed Fast Times.
Okay.
Like that's where you go every day for work is, it was just a nondescript office building next to a mall.
Yep.
Like that's where we're making these animated cartoons
Right.
until they built that animation building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of other things. I listened to some of the other interviews and I'm like, oh no, wait, I want to make a comment about that.
Well, Glenn, I hate to be selfish, but there are a lot of things I didn't get to ask you today, and I really don't want to go too long on this. So, would you consider at some point down the road, and maybe with somebody else even, coming back and sharing some more of your experiences and expertise in the art? Because I have a lot of art questions that I didn't get to ask you.
I had a couple as well.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I mean, now that
you ask some of them and cut out some of that other stuff, that's fine too.
I'd love to have you back on, and if you're amenable to it, I'd love to have you back on with like Rich or Dan or somebody like that, because some of our more popular episodes have been having like an actor's and a writer's perspective, or the director, and so it'd be great to have the artist and a writer and producer and everything if you'd be up for something like that at all. Because
I think like James and I would be good, just because I think James and I could fill in what I don't remember or what James doesn't remember. Like
that would be a pretty good show. I have to say, you and James together. We would love that. That would make us very, very happy, and I think the fans would so enjoy it. You were saying earlier, well, I don't know if people are interested in some of the stories I have, and I said, trust me, the people are interested in the stories you have. We're so interested. We'd like you to come back and share more stories.
I think at some point, I think I bowed out on certain aspects of the show. I feel like James took more of the lead on the character designs. I feel like if you want to ask more questions about character designs, I would say a lot more of it went through Bruce and James.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like James was more of the DC Comics fan and had a stronger opinion about stuff. Yeah, ultimately, I think in terms of the leads on a lot of that stuff, I would say James and Bruce have more stake in it. Yeah, I would say I was around until season 2, and I think somewhere at the beginning of season 2, I think it's like Titans kind of has a green light, so move forward.
Yeah.
I think we moved forward in development, and then I think at some point I moved to a different floor. And then we would interact with the Justice League crew, and Bruce is like, we're going to do this story with Lex Luthor and Flash. And it's like, oh, that's funny, because I wanted to do a episode where Beast Boy gets smart. And I think we ended up not doing it. But at some point it was really weird. Like Bruce and I would be comparing notes, and a lot of the stories were like similar themed stories, but like Justice League went this way and we went another way. So at one point that was kind of funny, where it's like we would compare notes. So we were in the same building, so we would nerd out and talk about stuff. And then like crossing over in the recording booths.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that Justice League episode where the Teen Titans cast is playing is it the Royal Flush Gang?
Yes. Yeah.
And then we used Rosenbaum for Kid Flash. Yeah, anyway,
that Batman Beyond episode with the Royal Flush Gang, that was so cool. I saw the cast list and I was like, oh my God, it's the Titans. That was brilliant. Well, so we won't nail you down. We won't let you give a definitive answer. But please know we are interested in having you back. You don't need to commit right now, but we would love to have you back on, and sure. Susan will be in touch with you about that. But as we wrap this up, let people know: are you active on social media? Are there websites where people can reach out and see what you're doing? Or are you kind of just involved in work, and you're probably better off not having social media? Which is it?
I'm on Instagram, but it's more nerdy. This is the art I like. I feel like it's over time, it's become maybe a little bit more personal and less about the work. Yeah.
So Instagram is the main hub.
Yeah.
Yeah. For people, for all those Glen Murakami fans out there, they can see his account on Instagram, which is how I tracked him down, because we have heard your name mentioned so many times, and I have seen your name in the credits for since I started the show, and probably well before that. But your name is one of those names that you always see, and you're like, I wonder, I want to talk to that person. I want to hear his story. So I thank you, Glen, for saying yes. It has been a joy to have you on, and it's just, I learned a lot, and thank you for doing this with us. We so appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks very much. We'll definitely reach back out, because like I said, it'd be great to talk to you some more. So hopefully we can have you on again.
Thank you, Glen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Be well. There he goes, Glen Murakami. It's great to finally have one of the artists and talk to them.
How many times have we heard his name mentioned? It's ridiculous. It was like, I'm surprised people weren't saying, when are you getting Glen on? That was lovely. And it was great to have an artist on, because we haven't heard from the art department. And Dan Reba is so, he's always so conscientious about not taking credit for things that he doesn't deserve. So he's always saying, yeah, that wasn't me. So we finally found somebody who it is him. And I'm thrilled he did it. I think he was a little reluctant, but that went really well.
And I enjoyed the backstory, because you do, as he pointed out in the beginning, he needed to walk through, because there was all this setup. We wouldn't have Justice League without Batman the Animated Series and without Superman the Animated Series. And, like when he did a no pun intended callback to that Batman Beyond episode, The Call, where we see the future Justice League, which laid the seeds in Bruce Timm's mind for, well, we could probably, all that background story was fantastic.
Well, and I think it was so important for him to give us context. And that's one of the things when I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago to ask him to be on the show, he said, is it okay if we go back? And I'm like, is it okay? That's what James and I are here for. Like, your origin story. We love that stuff. And so that, I hope he enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it. And I hope the fans will enjoy it as much, because there's so much information in there. And like I said, we haven't heard that perspective. So that was great.
And we're going to have him back on, because like I said, I had questions written down about specific art in certain episodes, like War World, stuff that Dan and Stan didn't know, things from the art that they use on Paradise Lost that we don't know for sure why this. So I'm excited to go back and talk to him. Now that we got a lot of the background, I want to kind of drill down into the art on certain specific episodes. That'll be great. And maybe we can get James Tucker on too with him. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what else? The next time we have him on, let's tell people that we're going to have him on, and that way they can ask questions, the artwork questions, the character creation questions, because today we didn't do that, because we knew we were going to have a lot to cover.
Right.
So we knew we wouldn't get to the questions from the internet, but from social media. So next time we'll do that, and I think that'll be lovely for the fans to ask their questions of Glen Murakami.
And if people want to ask questions of you, Susan Eisenberg, where are you on social media? Where are you?
Well, where am I? It's a really good question.
We all need a check right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Susan Eisenberg 1, as I hope and pray people know at this point, on all the social media platforms. And Susan Eisenberg Voice is my website. And if you're listening to this, we ask you very graciously if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the podcast, to leave a review for the podcast. That would mean the world to both of us. So please do that if you're enjoying this content. And what about you, mister? What do you have coming up? As if I didn't know.
I know there's a lot of stuff happening, but
I know, but we don't know when this is going to land, so we have to keep it pretty general. So
right.
How do people reach you?
Yeah, it's across all social medias. It's at Geek to Me Radio. It's the name of my radio show every Sunday at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Facebook.com/Geek to Me Radio, YouTube.com/Geek to Me Radio. If you would give my page on Facebook a follow or a like, I'm not sure which way it is for pages. And then also, if you would subscribe to Geek to Me Radio on YouTube, we'd love that. And of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Geek to Me Radio.
So it's Geek to Me Radio.
Correct. T-O, okay. Not the number 2.
Okay. All right, just making sure.
Yeah.
As opposed to me, who's Susan Eisenberg 1, the number 1.
The numeral 1, right.
The numeral. Look at you, Mr. Fancy Pants. Okay, so is that a wrap? Is that another one in the can?
We have got it all complete. It's ready to go, ready to be edited, posted online. We'll have this up in about 5 minutes from now. And no, of course not. But yeah.
All right, well, everyone, thank you for joining us. And, again, just stay tuned because the conversation continues.